Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people who I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment. And today, we're doing a third installment of our pop trivia show featuring Jaimie Vernon. Welcome back to the show, Jaimie.
Hey, it's a regular occurrence now.
Yeah, this is 3. So let's see if we can break our brains this time. I know you've been busy updating a lot of things and whatnot. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but let's hit the ground running with this, and we'll start with a band. I think you'll be okay with this one. How about Haywire?
Haywire, from the East Coast. I actually, my band in the 90s actually opened for them out here in Oshawa, which was interesting because they'd actually sold out Ontario Place on a Saturday night, and then they came to play Oshawa on a Sunday, and it wasn't as big a crowd. They were pretty annoyed about that whole thing, but it's a playthrough. While you're out at, doing the tour circuit, you got to hit every venue that you can, especially where they're going to pay you. So they did that. Always liked their stuff. I mean, great pop music, and actually the last couple albums I thought they kind of hit the ground running because they added kind of a hard rock element to what they were doing aside from the pop tunes. They've just announced a tour without lead singer Paul McCausland. And he's only bailed out for this one particular thing because he has something else actually on the go that was going to take him away from the whole thing. But
yeah, he has a day business of some sort.
Yeah, and it's starting to take off for him. So he's like, oh, this is bad timing. So apparently he's only going to bail out of this one tour. And they brought in J.D. Fortune, who actually had won the lead vocal spot for INXS after Michael Hutchence had died. So JD's going to fill in for him for this particular leg of the tour anyways, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, now there's a name you don't hear very often anymore, J.D. Fortune, wow.
No, well, there was a big falling out with him in INXS, so they basically did the album with him and did the world tour, and then, as he tells it, they kind of left him at the Sydney, Australia airport and said, sayonara, it was nice knowing you, and that was it. They never talked to him again. So, and it was back to Toronto he came without knowing what to do with his career. So, fortunately, he did some solo stuff, which was great for him, and I'm not really sure, other than this Haywire thing, what he's been doing in between those stints.
Yeah, well, that would be a really hard gig for anybody. Let's move on now to a little bit lesser known band, Cracker.
Cracker, kind of your typical bar band, kind of doing, boogie woogie rock and blues, and they had quite the stage show. They were at Hamilton. They put up 2 pretty decent records. Unfortunately, the stuff really didn't get any airplay. I think mostly because everybody looked at it as a novelty. But I think they were good songwriters all around. I mean, you would have to be to put those kind of shows on for all the years that they did and still get booked all the time across Canada.
Yeah, you're right. They were a really good bar band, and sometimes it's just really tough to try and break out of that. But yeah, there's probably a lot of people across the country that saw them play at their favorite bar from time to time, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I discussed this. I consider a band like Chevy Dirt the same thing. Had little pockets of fame all around the country that once you latch on to a certain area or a certain town, that, they just love you. And, that becomes kind of your little microcosm of fame or infamy as it goes, because apparently Cracker they were kind of lewd and rude on stage on occasion. Similarly, with an earlier band of the same nature, which was the Greaseball Boogie Band, they did kind of a sha-na-na thing, but over the top. They took a burlesque approach to it, where everybody was dressed in black leather and everything, and this is kind of pre-Village People and that type of thing. So there was this kind of homoerotic thing going on with their stage show that everybody just seemed to dig. I mean, funny enough, bikers were kind of their biggest audience. And over time, they kind of mutated into a band called Shooter. Greaseball Boogie Band were on GRT Records, and then the label kind of went, you guys should write some songs and stuff, and we'll get you on the radio. And they did. Ralph Murphy, who was better known as producer for April Wine, got them some songs from Leo Sayer, and they recorded those, and Long Tall Glasses became their breakout hit here in Canada. So
yeah, they had a lot of success with Train as well, and it's funny.
Yes, that's the other, and that was also Leo Sayer.
It's funny that you were saying that the record company said you guys should write some songs, and then their hits were all covers.
There were 4 singles off that album, and 2 of them were originals, and the other 2 were Leo Sayer tunes, but the Leo Sayer ones were the ones that got the push. and got on the radio. So, and I think that had to do with radio programmers. They would have just looked at the songwriting credit going, oh, Leo Sayer, this also qualifies as CanCon, Canadian content, so let's put these on the radio.
Right.
And then GRT followed that up with songs written by the band itself and didn't quite get the legging, unfortunately. They couldn't quite get a leg up on that.
We've talked about evergreen bands before, and coming out of Shooter and the Greaseball Boogie Band was eventually the Cameo Blues Band.
Correct. Yeah, most of the players from that ended up in there. Cameo also had Ray Harrison was in that band, and Harrison was also a member of Crowbar.
Editor's note. First of all, Jaimie Vernon is one of the most knowledgeable people that you will ever meet or talk to as far as Canadian music history is concerned. I do have to clarify that while Ray Harrison did play with Crowbar, whose heyday was circa 1970 to 75 and had a huge hit with Oh What a Feeling in Canada and North America, I believe, Ray's stint was short-lived. After Shooter, he played with Crowbar from 77 to 78, and as Ray Harrison told me himself, they had a horrible traffic accident where most of their gear was destroyed, so that was pretty much the end of Crowbar, although they have had some momentary returns since then. And now back to the show.
Ray is one of the most phenomenal keyboard players out of Hamilton. Again, it's a great town for music for sure.
Okay, Jaimie, how about the DeFranco family?
Yeah, they were brothers and sisters from Port Colborne, Ontario, and Mom and Dad encouraged them to sing their little hearts out and stuff, and they ended up on a whole bunch of local television shows and stuff. CHCH in Hamilton, they were on some music shows in Toronto and stuff, and someone sent their photo to Tiger Beat magazine in the United States, and the editors of the magazine were like, oh my God, there's teen sensations from Canada, let's bring them to Hollywood. So they did, and basically just plastered their pictures all over Teen Beat for a couple of months and paid for them to stay down there. And then suddenly they started getting interest from record labels. They were signed to 20th Century at that point. And of course, Love Beat, It's a Heartbeat.
I was going to say, who could forget?
Heartbeat, It's a Love Beat became the big hit, and Abracadabra. And they did, I think on the second album, Save the Last Dance for Me, the remake of the 1960s soul song.
Right. I remember that.
Tony, who was the kind of the face of the group and the lead singer, he still lives in Beverly Hills and he sells real estate to rich people.
Wow.
Yeah, he's the real estate agent for the Stars, apparently.
From teen idol to real estate agent to the Stars. Awesome. Okay, well, how about we'll go from teen idols to not so pretty. How about the Ugly Ducklings?
The Ugly Ducklings. Basically what we now know as garage rock from the 60s, but they kind of fell into the psychedelic era in 1967, 68, playing Yorkville in Toronto. And they kind of became a sensation because they opened for the Rolling Stones in Toronto, and Mick Jagger thought that they were kind of the next evolution of what the Rolling Stones could be. So that kind of became a bonnet in their cap for the Ducklings. They were actually a high school band from Cedar Brae Collegiate here in Scarborough, Ontario, and kind of came up through the ranks, like I said, playing in Yorkville and stuff. But they branched out, a lot of acts from that time. Yorkville was mostly coffee houses, so it was a lot of folk acts. And then as it's transitioned into rock bands, people like the Poppers and the Ugly Ducklings and Richie Knight and the Midnights and stuff, those acts started opening for larger bands at Maple Leaf Gardens and the Coliseum and stuff at the exhibition. So it worked out well for the Ducklings, and, they had a hit with Gaslight and a follow-up called Nothing, and both great psychedelic rock tunes that, still get lots of classic rock airplay on the radio now.
Yeah, and of course, at one point in time, Ronnie Hawkins tried to hire them.
Which would have been ridiculous, given, not that the Ugly Ducklings weren't up for the challenge, but it's I think it would have been a step down for the Ducklings to then, become this pseudo-country act. It didn't make any sense.
Well, they were apparently right at the brink of breaking as far as they did when Ronnie Hawkins told Dave Bingham, eventually you're going to play for me.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
Yeah, no, that was one time when Ronnie didn't get the band.
No.
How about Luba?
Luba. What a wonderful voice. I mean, this is a lady that it's funny enough, her background is actually Eastern European. And she was basically a singer for Ukrainian weddings and things like that. And a producer kind of heard her and stuff. But she made one album of Ukrainian pop songs. And that one's rarely ever heard by anybody. And she went under her real name, which is really long and unpronounceable for me. So I apologize to her. But then another producer came along and said, we've got these pop tunes. You might want to try this. And she had a band at that point, an actual pop rock act. And they did an EP, and that had Every Time I See Your Picture, I Cry, which kind of became a local hit there. And then Capitol Records heard that and went, well, we could do something with that. And they re-recorded the tune for a full album, and that's her debut. And, she kind of exploded from there. And funny enough, it took a while before she had the monster hit, which was Let It Go.
Right.
And that became kind of it was an anthem, just like Rise Up by Parachute Club, that kind of spelled for much music and for radio and stuff. That was kind of it's the summer of joy, and everybody, let's team up and, live and love together kind of thing. And
I saw her open around that time for Paul Young.
That would have been great.
Yeah, it was a really good show. Between Luba and Paul Young, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah. And she's on Facebook, actually, and she's quite interactive with people, so it's kind of great. I'm not sure. It doesn't appear that she's been recording anything in the last little while. Her last little EP she put out was, probably 5-6 years ago. She commutes a lot between Montreal and the Caribbean, and she spends a lot of time down there, though with COVID, she hasn't been doing much of that at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, the world has totally changed. My friend John McGale, who's mostly known for the band Offenbach, had a really sweet gig, or I guess he will have again, where for 3 months of the year, he had a contract to play down in the islands, and when COVID hit, he played 2 weeks of his 3-month contract, and they all just had to pick up and get off the island.
Wow, that's a bummer.
Yeah, no kidding. So let's move on to, how about the Dudes?
The Dudes. Well, Bob Segarini, who is actually originally from California, was in a band called the Whackers, and they toured Canada and liked Montreal so much that they decided to move there, which was a real problem for their record label in the United States, Electric, because they're like, well, we're giving you money to put out albums, but you're not touring it anywhere. And they're like, well, we really like Montreal a lot. So after I guess it was the third album, so that was the second album they'd recorded while they were in Montreal, the label just went, well, if you don't come back to the United States and help tour this thing, then you're done. So they dropped them. And then some of the guys from the band went, well, if we don't have a record deal, we're going back to the United States. So that left Bob to kind of put together a new version of the band with some of the previous members and a bunch of new guys. And they put out one single on Polydor Records, or Polygram at the time, and that didn't go anywhere. So what was left of that ensemble of the Whackers became a group called All the Young Dudes. They brought in Brian Greenway, and this is, I think, pre-April 1, because I think after the Dudes, that's when he joined April 1. Anyways, Brian Greenway was in that band, and some of the guys from the Whackers, and they got signed to CBS Records in 75, and of course, the label went, well, All the Young Dudes, it's kind of a Mott the Hoople song, and they're like, well, yeah, that's why we named ourselves that. They're like, yeah, but that's a bit of a conflict with Mott the Hoople, because they're still together, and they're still doing their thing, and why don't we just shorten it to the Dudes? So that was kind of the first compromise, and it was the first sign that something was not kosher. And then secondly, they brought in a producer to produce their stuff to take all the edge off of what was effectively some really, the Whackers were a pop rock act with a tinge of a little bit of country in there. And All the Young Dudes were a little more of that, a bit heavier, given that it's Brian Greenway who was in April Wine. And then once they got into the studio to record this thing with this producer, he just shaved all the toughness out of it. Just took out all the kind of raunchiness and rock and roll and turned it into a pop record. And to this day, the band members hate it.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
So that was their only album. Their only album was their self-titled record in 75. And then after that, Bob decided to go solo. he left Montreal and decided, you know what, I'm going to move to Toronto and try and get a solo deal, which he did. He got signed to A&M first, put out an EP, and then Bomb Records scooped him up. So it worked out well for Bob, I think. But, the Dudes is kind of this blip in between the Whackers and Bob's solo career.
Look what they've done to my song, Ma.
Pretty much.
Yeah, no kidding.
Bob's always said to me that, given his druthers, he'd go back and re-record the Dudes album as opposed to remix it. Other stuff he just wants to remix to kind of bring it up to speed, but he said for the Dudes record, he'd rather just re-record those songs. Yeah. Now, all the Young Dudes demos, that actually came out. Pacemaker Records put that out in 1997, 1998 on CD, and it's a way better record than the Dudes album. And some of those tunes, Bob ended up re-recording it in his solo career too. So like Juvenile Delinquent, which April Wine actually did a version of. So it's all kind of incestuous with that whole group of guys.
Yeah, it's a small circle.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Jaimie, what can you tell us about Candy and the Backbeat?
Candy and the Backbeat? Well, they were actually an Italian wedding band called Sensation initially. And then, when they came to the attention of record label guys, it was like, well, she's kind of the sexy front gal. We're going to put her name first kind of thing. So she became the center of attention. And unfortunately, everybody kind of called the group just Candy, but there was actually a band behind her. And they did really well. Unfortunately, it was on a smaller label, so they kind of distributed by a major, but they kind of didn't get the push they needed to. I think given an opportunity, had they opened for people like Miami Sound Machine or something, I think they would have taken off stateside. Because there was, aside from the band being Italian, there was kind of this Latin feel to what they were doing.
Yeah, that would have been a good match for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know, somebody might correct me. They may have actually played in those circuits with those types of acts too, the dance bands, but it was a hard sell. She got lots of airplay, or they got lots of airplay on Much Music and stuff, which really helped, I think. And toured a lot. They opened for a lot of bigger Canadian acts. But it all comes down to management, and it all comes down to how far do you want to take this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
She's retired now and married, and I think has been teaching or something.
Well, we're all a lot older now than we were then. And everything changes, whether we like it or not. Okay, how about another, Zappacosta?
Alfie Zappacosta. Well, funny enough, he's another guy that came out of a band initially. He was in the group Surrender. They were signed to Capitol Records, and Surrender's first EP that they put out kind of did really well. And then the band kind of fell apart, and the label went, well, you're still signed to the label, so, Alfie, why don't you do a solo record? And of course, he kind of lifted a couple of tunes from that EP and moved forward with that. And his kind of big claim to fame was that he wrote a tune for the Dirty Dancing soundtrack that technically was just a filler track for the movie soundtrack. And he made millions from it because the soundtrack sold 4 million copies right out of the gate after the release of the movie. So they get that big paycheck in there. Now, funny enough, he went from a pop artist. He's now doing jazz. The same way Gino Finelli kind of made that transition from pop into jazz as well. And he's doing really well. Alfie does a lot of stuff in the South, Caribbean, Central America, South America, that kind of stuff. I think he's back here right now because of COVID. He's been doing stuff, working on another record, from what I understand.
Yeah, it seems it's either been released or it's pretty close to being released. I've been talking back and forth with Alfie on social media about it, and I hope to interview him soon.
He's been posting links about it and stuff, so I'm trying to figure out whether, there's some things on Spotify from this new album, and I'm not sure whether the whole album is out yet. I'd have to double check that, so...
He also seems to be spending a fair bit of time with his family these days. I think he has a new grandchild, so...
Yeah, very proud grandpapa.
And both you and I know what that's like.
Well, it's funny, in Toronto, here we've got Pizza Pizza, which is 967-1111. And the competition was Pizza Nova, which is another pizza company, and he did the theme song for that. And it's been running, that commercial's been running on the air for over 20 years now.
Wow.
And it's him still singing this thing. So I hope he's still getting some kind of royalty off of that thing, because a lot of times the contracts run out and then they have to re-record stuff and renegotiate with the artists. So,
right.
But, that thing...
It's funny when you mention Pizza Nova because, as you know, I live in London, and years back in the 90s, right before the Blue Jays did their back-to-back World Series run, I would just get in the car and drive from London to Toronto, and back in those days, you could just walk up to the gate and get tickets to the game. And oftentimes, with your ticket came a coupon for a free pizza from Pizza Nova.
Right.
And I'd be, all right, I'm going to get free pizza when I get home. Well, there's no Pizza Nova in London.
No, exactly.
There's no crying in baseball.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, it came down to the whole telephone wars because the jingle of the song is the phone number for Pizza Nova, and I'm not going to repeat it here because I'm not giving them any advertising.
Yeah.
But it's the same with in Toronto. Pizza they started the whole thing because their telephone number is kind of their identity. So Pizza Nova thought they'd compete with it, but they turned it into a jingle, which Alfie sang. And of course, it took him a long time to live that down. And he's probably hoping that Americans never hear that because he made his fame in the States off of that Dirty Dancing soundtrack.
Right. And conversely, Keith Hampshire is the OK Blue Jays guy.
That's right.
And he's a huge Blue Jays fan, and he's really happy with that jingle, and so am I.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, and, as we know, Keith had a substantial career in the 70s, including a television show, which was short-lived, but it was kind of neat.
He had the best of the best Canadian acts on there. I mean, April Wine was on there, the Stampeders, you name it. Anybody who was anybody in the day was on the Keith Hampshire show.
Yeah, and he had Klaatu on there, and it was their only appearance as a group before they toured in 1981.
Wow.
They actually performed on the show in 1974, and then after they performed on the show, they realized, no, we're never going to appear in public again.
Well, I recently talked to Terry Draper.
Yes, my own buddy Terry.
Yeah, and we did one of the Rounding the Corner series. And so, of course, I said, now that things are starting to open up a little bit, have you got any plans for any gigs? No. Emphatically no. Unequivocally no. I will not play live again.
I've literally had to, every single time, we've literally had to drag him out of his basement studio at Swamp Manor and say, Terry, let's do this. Let's put on some shows. A good friend of ours, David Bash out of California, he puts together these pop music festivals. And the hook for the festival is that he doesn't take bands around to different cities. He goes to the city and he taps the artists from each of those cities. So it becomes a local community thing where artists, a lot of them who know each other, play in that city. And if you want to play another city on David's tour, then all you have to do is ask him. You go, oh, yeah, if you want to play New York, come on down and we'll put you on for a night or whatever. So every time David came to town for the Toronto shows, I would just be like, Terry, come on, you got to play it. Let's promote your next album and stuff. He's like, no, I don't want to.
Well, and I get it because his stuff is complex,
Oh, absolutely. Like we've always had to have 3 keyboard players on stage. So, and it's really hard to coordinate. The last time I played with him, he put together a band called, it's Terry Draper and the Prime Radiant. And we did a tribute night to a friend of ours that had passed away from cancer. And he had been in Segarini's band, Cats and Dogs. His name was Rick Gunn, and I said to Terry, I said, we should really go and pay respects to Rick, and we'll get up and do some songs. So we did. We got up there, did Calling Occupants and all that stuff, which the crowd just absolutely loved. But, Terry's decided, I've had enough. I don't want to do this anymore. It's really stressful for him because the load's on him as both the lead singer and then kind of front the whole thing and playing keyboards and whatnot. But, I've been in a few bands with him. Terry in the Twilight Zone, we put out a live album, which really was really, really good. And I think that was kind of the high point. And it's been hard to rekindle another band with as much energy as that one had. So I understand his hesitancy. He did a Christmas show for us, though, one time. Played his Christmas songs, which was kind of neat. He does really well solo. I think he should just do it that way. Do it as a one-man.
Right, yeah. Well, he's probably got the technology to do it. Now, speaking of playing in bands, what's new with you?
Well, my band, Mr. Moray, is on hiatus. It's COVID. We were halfway through an album. We got half of it recorded, and the other half is still yet to be recorded. And we're looking at completing that hopefully by the end of the year, maybe into next year. So that's all kind of on hold. I've been doing a bunch of solo stuff that I'm working on home for the first time in 13 years. My last solo album was in 2008. So I hope to have a new one out probably in the new year as well. And then mostly I've been working on updating the Canadian Pop Music Encyclopedia, which is now, I've got a year's worth of updates input. I've added another 450 artists to the indexes there, and it can be seen at canpopencyclopedia.com. And basically it's kind of the history of Canadian music. And if you got any suggestions on updates or changes or things I got wrong, there's a place that you can email me and send me your thoughts. No hate mail, and no, I can't get you an autograph from your favorite artist, and I can't tell you where they live.
Damn.
So
I was just going to ask that.
Oh, dude, I get that all the time. I went to high school with blah, blah, blah. What are they doing these days? And it's like, I don't know. It's like,
man,
I'm not a dating service. I'm just a guy that's basically recording the history of Canadian music. That's it. I'm just documenting what has happened.
There you go. Anyways. So there's no hope for me of getting an autograph from Candy.
Oh, my God. Yeah. There's a whole episode in the things that I've been sent or the things that have happened because of the encyclopedia. It's a great network for me. It started out as a hobby of mine, and it was initially published by the Toronto Sun out of Toronto. And that's how I got in contact with all of Canada's greatest musicians and artists of all time. They just sent me their notes going, here, I want to be in the encyclopedia, and here's my history. Or, you got that fact wrong. Here's an update. And some of those guys I ended up signing to my record label, because it was clear that their material, which a lot of them own their own master tapes, I ended up signing to my own record label. One kind of led to the other, which was kind of cool. That's how I signed Gata. Greg had his master tapes, and he's like, nobody wants to sign me. It's like, I will. We'll take that on. No problem.
I got to get Greg on the show. He's
for sure.
He's more or less a few times committed and then not responded further. So it is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's got his own new video cast now on YouTube as well, so he's doing that whole thing. So
yeah. Well, listen, Jaimie, once again, this has been great fun, and I am so glad that you've taken the time out of your day to do this with me. And
hey, I'm happy to do it.
Until next time, my friend, cheers.
Okay, man.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our third installment of Pop Trivia with Jaimie Vernon from Bullseye Records. Hey, be sure to check out canpopencyclopedia.ca to learn more about Canadian music history, and you can find all kinds of really cool music at Bullseye Records on bandcamp.com. Now, here is Jaimie Vernon and Life is a Canadian Rock. Enjoy.
Nothing matters but the weekend. BB Gabor and the extras, Major Hooples and Wesaka, Sandy Kim and Anka Polly, Edward has a barefoot Molly, got the buzz out of Haywire, Sarah M's into the fire, Guy Lombardo, Big Bang Huncho, Elma Combo in Toronto, Boogie Oogie Dancer, M would Holly be the new romancer, Burton's coming, Blackman's Randy, the head is tragically still standing, Harmonium and Charlebois, Pegliero's got rain showers, Alan Chad and Alan Berry, Chuckers use a Boots of Jerry, now which way did Billy go? Terry Jackson season up. Life's a Canadian rock, but the radio rolled me, gotta turn it up loud. DJ told me, life's a Canadian rock, but the radio rolls me. At the end of my rainbow ride, life's a golden oldie. FM phasers, legend stunning. Saskatoon, the guess who's running? Rio Spartan in the 50s, Red Leaf Roman are the 60s. Giselle McKenzie, Abbey Holder, Metal Queen, a jazz reformer, Colin James and Colin Linden, Lords of London, Art for Bruton, Concan, Cherry, Bill and Bilson, David Gary, Lonjo Valdry, Woodgie, B&L, Muxus Ruby, Luke's Apostles in the market, poor insensitive Jen Arden. After 4, you know what's happening. NATO MP trainers amping. Dave the Rave, a teenage head, Rebels unforgotten yet. Life's a Canadian rock, but the radio. Life's a Canadian rock, but the radio. Robin, Rod and Roddy, Davies, Frank and Youngster Richie, Downshot Boosters, Rick and Donnie, Sasson, Mark and Kevin, Jordan, Mitchell, Kim and Mitchell, Joni, Gordon, Lightfoot, Murray and Neil Young, Wilkins, Stills and Crosby, Frank Marino, Brian Adams, Carol Pope, Marshall, Amanda, Harco's Auntie, and Celine, Coburn finally heard his tree, Alanis says you wanna know, Sweet Thing is a true life hero, Katie's Cake, actually like Anvil, Stompin' Tom, Spun Potato, Bullseye and the Sonic Onion, Bongo beating all the others. Life's a Canadian rock, but the radio rolls me. Gotta turn it up louder. So my DJ told me, whoa, 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 whoa. Life's a Canadian rock, but the radio rolls me. At the end of my rainbow ride, watch your Ashby's Oldies. Listen, remember, the playing can come. Moxie and Santa's on honeymoon sweet talking. A fruit and cold water, then they tried walking. Esquires, townsmen, Ottawa, got staccato. And then we'll have to rush into the spirit of radio. Steppenwolf, rock and roll, Gino's got a lot of soul. Peter Foley, Sigarini, Rio Statics, Dave Bedini, Paper Wine, BTO, Loverboy, Blue Rodeo. Oh, what a feeling, what a Stan Peters, Big Sugar, Ian and Sylvia, Katie Lang, Terry Clark, Paul Brand, Skylark, Nickelback, Arcade Fire, Lana Miles, and M. Griner. Harem Scarum, Grapes of Wrath, the Bull Marks, clap their hands. Hank Snow, Wilf Carter, Gordy Tap, Marty Butlers, Bates Children, Sam McNally, Little Caesar, and the Consuls. Garth, Ricky, Vaughn and Robbie, Ian Thomas, Doug McKenzie, Dream Warriors, Maestro, Satellites, Lazo, Polkton, Stan, and the Crash Test Junkies. Graham, Cochran, Hunter, they're all Tommies.
Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including producing, editing, guest acquisition, etc. All rights reserved. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends was written and recorded by Tommy Solo with a little help from my friends in the night crew. And hey, if you like the show, why not subscribe? Until next time, cheers.